In conversation with Miriam Verbeek, when she's not writing or editing, Miriam is likely in the garden, in the bush, walking or running with her dogs, playing with grandchildren or reading a book. When she's writing, she uses issues that have been stuffed into her brain while studying for a variety of academic degrees from BA to MBA and PhD, rounded out in management consulting projects, academic editing tasks, and a lot of international travel. Although her books are fiction, they are grounded in contemporary social and environmental issues. And on today's episode of Photo Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today, Miriam Verbeek. How are you doing, Miriam?
Just fine, just fine. It's very late here in Australia, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
11.
I forgot you're joining from Australia. Time travel. I think we're 9 hours apart. It's afternoon here in Nigeria. That's a good idea for a sci-fi novel. Thanks for joining, really. So, Miriam, I was taken aback reading through the discussion page of your book, Sky Seeker Princess, a thrilling epic tale of adventure and courage, which is the first book in the series of the Song of Psy Emperor book series. I'd like to ask you, how does this book come about? What inspired you to write Sky Seeker's Princess?
That's an interesting question
Yeah.
because it goes all the way back to when I was about 15 or 16. And I was sitting in a classroom, and the
Mm,
teacher was teaching us about the Corn Laws in England. Now, I could not understand why somebody in Australia should have to learn about an 18th, 17th century, now an 18th century law all the way over in England. And I realized then that in order for something, for people to be able to learn something, it has to
mm,
be relevant. It has to mean something to them.
yeah.
And I imagined myself tipping back into that particular period and thinking, well, if I was a girl growing up in that period, then that would become relevant. So
Mm,
Sky Seeker's Princess and the whole of the Songs of the Emperor series is really a fictionalized representation of the sorts of issues that we currently, humans on this earth, are currently
mm,
going through, I should say. So it's an adventure story, um, but it's paralleling what's happening to us with this mix of cultures that we're currently all undergoing. So that was the inspiration behind Sky Seeker's Princess. And
oh,
yes, it is an epic adventure because us humans love stories. And so that's why I made it an epic adventure.
wow, that sounds very amazing, really. I love your inspiration behind it. And you were wondering why someone in Australia had to study something from someone in England because, it must have been very, very important, really. Yeah, that's very amazing. And that's a lovely introduction into becoming a writer. That's a lovely introduction into becoming an author. And if you have a copy of the book there, I love you to show to the camera just so we see what it looks like.
So this is the first
Wow.
in the series, Sky Seeker's Princess. I've actually had several different covers, but
Wow,
this was
this
the
is
cover
beautiful.
of the book. Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
the setting is in on an island in Antarctica, so
Oh,
it's a very cold and lots of snow, lots of
it's super
mountains,
listening.
volcanoes, that sort of stuff.
Oh, wow, that's amazing, really. That's amazing. And you also have the follow-up series on the name of Scriptor Champion. For readers who haven't read that yet, and of course, without giving much information away, could they have a stick of what you would expect in terms of teams picking up Scriptor Champion?
So that's the cover for Cryptal's Champion.
Wow.
So it directly follows on from Sky Seeker's Princess. So in Sky Seeker's Princess, the main heroine, um, that's when she's 17, 18 years old,
Hmm.
and she has the ability to be able to solve or to help solve the problems of the society.
Wow.
But she doesn't want to. So she sort of stands back, and there are some things that she gets involved in. But in the Cryptal's Champion, which is the next one, she basically has no choice. She has no choice but to go ahead. And Cryptal's Champion is a lot more gritty. It's still an adventure story, but it goes into a lot of psychological and personal issues. There are issues that women have that are often quite taboo. You don't
Mm.
talk about them because they're women's issues. And so I took that brave step of in Cryptal's Champion of actually saying, hey, women are human as well. And these are some of the issues that women have to go through, and they can overcome them, and they can still play a big role in society. So that's a little bit of the sorts of things that are going on in Cryptal's Champion. But that's all background stuff. It's an adventure story. So you can read it on very many levels.
Oh, I love the fact that this thing's actually adventurous, yeah. I'm a huge fan of novels in this category and genre. Thanks for sharing. I'd also like to ask you why writing a serious novel can be quite interesting and demanding, yet I would like to ask you, how do you develop your characters? Because characters to me feels like the most integral part of storytelling. To me, I love characterization. But then I like to ask you, how do you develop your characters?
Characters sort of pop into my head. They,
Mm,
I'll be walking along and suddenly there's a character that just pops into my head, and they can sit there in my head for years.
wow.
Years and years, like the main character of Sky Seeker's Princess.
Mm,
I'm now 70 years old, and
mm,
Sky Seeker's Princess, the character for that Sky Seeker's Princess probably came into my head when I was about 35.
wow.
And so I, you know, talk to these characters. In my head, of course, I don't do it out loud because people might think I'm mad. And I get to know these characters quite well
Wow.
before I start telling a story about them, and the story develops around the characters. And then I bring in the sorts of issues that I want to talk about. I used to think that all authors did it that way. And I was
Mm,
at a writers' conference one time, and I found that every author develops their characters differently. Some people interview their characters, other people base their characters on people that they know. So everybody
mm.
does it differently, but that's how my characters come about.
Oh, well, I love hearing about how your characters came about, yeah, and how they pop up into your head. I think that's one of the fun things of becoming a writer. You can just be doing or just getting alongside with your day-to-day job, and they were just like, "Oh, I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello." Your head and say, "Okay, start speaking." It's always amazing, really, and it's always fun. I enjoy you talking about that, and I can relate to that as well. Like you just pop up from nowhere. And
Yeah, it's
hilariously, you
amazing.
mentioned, sorry to cut you short, you mentioned that you're now 70, but you had an idea for that character 35 years ago. That's nearly, 3 decades ago, yeah, and more than half. Yeah, that's a lot, really. That's amazing.
So I know that character very well. She's been a friend a
Wow.
long time.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Good, good. So you do
Yeah.
the same thing with your characters.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about your addictive, slow burn mystery international crime thriller. Would you like to tell us about that as well, how it came to be, the making of it as well?
Sure, sure. Look, the third book, I'll just backtrack. So the third book in the series, the
Beautiful
Siempre series,
cover.
is so
Impacting.
when the person from Cryptal's Champion, so
Mm,
she actually then becomes a very important person in this culture that she has managed to bring back together.
mm,
And when I wrote that book and I sent it off, then when I finished writing it, I sent it off to an editor. I always work with editors.
Mm,
And she read it through and she said, look, there's a portion in this, because I wanted to talk about people who are different. So people like homosexuals or transgender people, or,
mm,
people who aren't just average. And I had a couple of chapters about that in the book.
mm.
Uh, and she said, I either needed to do more with it or I needed to do less,
Wow,
because as it was in there, it was jarring in the story. So I took it out because the story was long enough. But I had
wow,
these three chapters sitting there, and it was a crime that had occurred within the society.
wow,
And I thought, oh, I think I can do something with this. And so I then developed the book, which is this one here.
wow.
It's called The Website.
Website.
In the website, so it was basically, you have this culture in Antarctica. It's a culture that's only recently discovered the internet and reading and writing and all of these
Oh,
sorts of things. Okay.
interesting.
So then the internet comes in, and of course, the people who then immediately become very good are those who abuse the internet.
Mm,
So they get onto the dark web, they start, dealing with drugs and dealing with abusing children and that sort of stuff. And
wow,
so Interpol becomes interested in that society. And so it has a lot of techno stuff in there, IT
mm,
stuff. And so I had to develop a character who goes into Siempre, solves that problem. So that was how I got into the crime. I never thought I was going to write crime, but that was how I got into that. So it's a crossover.
mm,
It's very much contemporary. It has Interpol, it has Europol, it has all the detective stuff, it has all the IT stuff. All of that sort of stuff is occurring in there, but it's occurring in this world that I made up, which is Siempre.
oh, that's quite amazing to know, really. That's very beautiful and quite compelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for
So
sh
that was fun. That was fun. And then what happened was that people read the website and the character that I developed for the website. And they said, wow, that's a fun character, Have you got some more ideas for doing that? And I did. I did have another idea for it. And it
Wow.
had to do with the timber industry in Australia.
Mm,
Like all around the world, in Africa, in throughout the Pacific, in Australia also, there's a lot of illegal timber cutting and sending
yeah.
around the world.
Deforestation.
Deforestation, illegal
Yeah.
deforestation around the world. And so I thought, I can develop a story around
Around it.
deforestation. And so I got that character. And again, she's working with Interpol. And I
The
created
forest.
this.
Oh, I love the utilization of your titles. Yeah. Speak volume.
Yeah, so I've got to try and keep yeah, titles are very hard to get right, aren't they?
Wow. Oh, that's beautiful and that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. And Miriam, one of the most interesting thing to me as a writer is to listen to readers' feedback. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that make literature to be complex in its entirety is the fact that it can be interpreted by readers in different ways based on their own opinion. And sometimes the reader might get the message intended by the author, sometimes they might be close to getting it, and sometimes they might be far from getting it. And sometimes they might hilariously just misunderstand the whole entire message in the book. And now, as interestingly as it sounds, and as hilarious too as it sounds, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than you intended? How does this make you feel?
Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful that people can engage with a piece of artwork
It
in
is.
whichever way they want?
It is
And
really.
sometimes, people will say something about my work, and I think, oh, wow, did they get that out of it? I didn't realize. And then I'm so
Yeah.
chuffed because it means that they actually read it and it meant something for them and they were able
Mm,
to get something out of it. So it's, look, any artwork, and I think of writing as doing something as
yeah.
an art, as an
Yeah.
artwork. So any artwork, once you put it out to the public, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It
Mm,
belongs to
the
whoever has
public.
taken that artwork and picked it up. So I don't have any problem whatsoever with people interpreting my work in whichever way they want.
Yeah.
And it also, it teaches me something, because if somebody interprets my work in a different way, then I think, now could I have written it slightly differently so that I got the message that I wanted them to get more clearly? So
Mm.
it teaches me something as well.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, I really love your answer to that question, and I can resonate with it so well. I love the fact that you mentioned it is wonderful, and it is truly wonderful for someone to interpret your work differently. I mean, it's amazing to get feedbacks, and when gets one is given an entirely different feedback from what you intended, like, oh wow, really? Oh, I never intend that, but oh, that's quite nice to know. I mean, it's beautiful. It's always amazing when you are told that, okay, this is what you're trying to portray. This is what I understand your book as. This is what I could garner from it, and this person's opinion there from this person is. It's always amazing, welcoming. Even you can even laugh, yeah, and have fun with it. It's a beautiful experience. It's a beautiful experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and like you said, once the work is out, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It is now the work, the cup of tea of the audience and the reader. It becomes
Exactly.
the reader's cup of tea for them to keep
Exactly.
sipping. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
Sometimes they have it with milk and sometimes with sugar.
Sometimes they add too much water and the whole thing diluted. So
Exactly.
that's beautiful. I love your take on that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. Now, I'd like to ask you too, what led you to first write a pseudo fantasy story to writing crime later on? And why are you interested in writing fiction? I particularly would love to hear your take on this.
Okay, let me answer first with why I write fiction.
Yeah.
It's already said, that people, humans, love stories, and we
Mm,
learn best when something is given to us as a story. You pick up a textbook and it's boring, 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 because it's just a whole lot of facts.
mm,
But if you put those facts into a story, you're able to understand it better. So when somebody is trying to tell something with a lot of facts in it,
mm.
like in a myth, the people in myths are, they're heroes, they're superheroes. They can't possibly exist because they are grander than the hero. Or you can
Yeah.
have landscapes that are grander than the landscapes that we have. Like that, I don't know whether you've seen the movie Avatar.
Mm,
You those the landscapes are incredible. But because in fiction you're able to exaggerate a
yeah.
particular aspect, you can then tell what you want to do in that exaggerated setting. Do I
Mm,
make myself clear? It's easier to do that in a fiction because you can control the environment. if you try to do it in a non-fiction setting, you can't control the environment. And so that's why I like to play around with fiction, because I can say the things and describe the things that I want to do in an environment that I can control. And so I started off with the fantasy world because I was trying to compress what was happening on this earth. And we live on a very complex planet with lots of different types of cultures, lots of different landscapes.
Yeah.
And so I created a compact island
Yeah.
that parallels the sorts of things that are happening in this complex world. And so that was why I chose fantasy, because I could do that. And then the segue into crime was because I just wanted to touch on particular aspects of things that are happening. So that's a very long answer to your question.
Yeah, it's a very nice one. I enjoy you talking about it. And that's a beautiful one. Getting to know how you transition or wanted to start with food or fantasy story to writing crime, and why you're particularly interested in writing fiction. That's quite beautiful to know. Thanks for sharing. Now let's talk about inspirations and ideas. You've written quite a lot of novels, and I've always been fascinated by how authors, especially novelists like yourself, would sit down and craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that sentence makes paragraph, and paragraph makes pages, and pages make chapters, and chapters coming together makes an amazing eventual big novel. And sometimes it got me thinking, how exactly did you get the words? Sit down, craft these words together, and you have this bunch of pages written with a story transitioning beautifully. Now as far as writing is because I like to ask you too, how do you get the inspirations and ideas for your books? Where did they come from?
First, they come from the character. So as I said before, the character pops into my
Mm,
head. And then I start to ask the question of, why is the character the way that that character is? So I'm talking to the character in my head and ask the questions or interact. And then I start to think, why do you answer the questions in that way? Why do you
mm,
react in a certain way? And then I start developing this world around them, and then gradually the story comes out. So
mm,
some writers are what they call plot writers. They sit down and they say the story is going to go start here, and then it goes, like this, and then that's going to happen, and it's going to end like that.
yeah,
I'm not that sort of writer. I start, and the adventure is as exciting to me as I'm going through as it
absolutely.
is to the reader,
Mm.
because I don't know what's going to happen either. It just sort of flows out.
That's beautiful to know. I see that you're character driven. That's amazing to know. I'm a huge fan of characterization too, especially when they keep transitioning, especially if it's a serious novel and when they have so many things they have to solve. The first problem not being solved in the first series, and it's still continuing the second series, and the problem still continuing the third, the continuing the fourth. I'll be like, oh goodness, that's amazing. Keep it going. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of characterization. And from your response, I see a character driven. That's very beautiful because they're part of the intricate part of storytelling. And again, speaking to different people so far, I had people tell me, well, I get inspiration from my real life experiences. I get inspiration from things I've seen around me. I get inspiration from conversation I heave drops on. I get inspiration from the story of friends of friends of friends of family members. I get inspiration hilariously from the dreams I have when I go to sleep. It's always surprising, very amazing, as we writers have a vast of ways of our inspirations and ideas come to be. It's always very wholesome.
Absolutely. And I probably should have said that inspiration, of course, comes from your own life experiences, you know, and from the things that you've read and the things that you've
Yeah.
learned. Somebody praised him for being a great man, and he said, "I am only a great man because I stand on the shoulders of giants." And it's true,
Mm,
we don't come into this world knowing everything. We learn
Yeah,
from one another, we learn from our experiences. And of course,
absolutely.
that all goes into the book. And of course, and I've done a lot of traveling in my life around the
Mm,
world. And I write very descriptively. So I love when I get into a scene to actually try to describe it so that the reader sees the scene in their mind.
mm,
And we live on such a beautiful planet. It is, gorgeous, from the
yeah.
tiniest little insect to vast mountain vistas. And so I like to be able to write in such a way that the reader can see the setting.
Mm,
Uh, and not only that, to engage with the people in a way that they understand.
wow, that's
Yeah, all those
beautiful.
sorts of things are certainly, they're all inspirations. As you said, in your interactions with other authors,
Yeah,
they've said all of these things. And yeah, it's true.
yeah,
Inspiration comes from many sources.
everywhere really. That can't. Thank you so much, Miriam, for sharing. And now, apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on? If you'd like to show the books, I'd like you to show it to the camera one after the other.
Yeah, I'm currently working on a third book, which I hope I'm going to finish within, or have the first draft done in the next few weeks. And it's also, it's actually, so the character in
The
these
forest.
books,
Yeah.
the forest and the website. Um, so because people said they liked that character,
Mm.
I've then had to go back and develop the beginning of that character.
Wow. Wow.
So she's 42 years old in this one. She's
Oh,
38 years old in this one. And the book that I'm
wonderful.
currently working on, she's 28.
Wow.
So I'm sort of going back in time with that, with those books. And then after I finish that one, there's a book that I've been writing since I was 18 years old. And I think I finally worked out how to write it properly. That's the next book I'll get onto.
Mm. That's beautiful to know. That's very amazing to know. I enjoy you talking about it, and that's very quite commendable. The works you've got so far are quite commendable, and I really appreciate the fact that you've got quite a lot ongoing. Thanks for sharing. Now, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your books that we did not mention in this interview, and you'd love the viewers to know? And also, what sort of advice do you have for, impending authors?
I guess for my books, the thing that I would say is to give them a go. This fantasy series
Yeah.
is not really a fantasy series. It's it's very hard to put it into a particular category.
Wow.
Um, because it was the first series that I wrote, I didn't know there was such a thing as genre. And so
Oh,
I didn't keep to the tropes that you're supposed to have in a genre. And then I
wow.
decided after I got to know about the genres that I wasn't interested in that anymore. I want to write what I want to write, not what people think I should write. And so I thought that initially I was writing predominantly a story that women would enjoy. But in fact, the
Mm,
feedback that I've received, the best feedback has actually been from men who've tried the story
mm,
and have, really got into it. So I guess for my books, I'd say give them a go. You don't have to like them, you can put them down. But
mm,
yeah, they're good. If you're a writer or if
yeah.
you're a budding writer, my advice is for you to sit down and write and not to think that you have to be perfect and that you have to punch out so many words and that you have to get it all right at the first go and you
Mm,
have to find a publisher and all that sort of stuff. There's a saying that before you can be a writer, you have to write 1,000,000 words.
mm,
And I think that's true. There are
mm.
very, very few
Wow.
people who, uh, are just geniuses and can write without a lot of practice. It needs a lot of practice before you can get it right. but you
Yeah.
shouldn't be afraid to do the practice.
Wow.
So that's my advice to writers. I work with quite a number of writers, of people who are learning how to write. And that's the biggest hurdle that they have, is that they're shy about doing something. They think,
Mm.
oh, but I can't do it, and I can't get it right. And you have to practice it.
Yeah. That's a great advice you've got there, Miriam. And I'm hoping that viewers, even including myself, love to utilize it. And just in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview, I would love to get a copy of any of your books. On what platform are they available on for purchase?
I've put them on every ebook platform that I can find. So
Mm.
they're on Apple, they're on Barnes and Noble, they're on Amazon, they're on Trove, they're on basically, if you type in my name, it will
Yeah,
come up. Those
great.
my books will all come up. And you can get them on as both a print on demand from a number of stores,
Mm,
or you can get them as an ebook.
that's
I
great.
also sell them from my website. They're a bit cheaper on my website.
Oh, that's
Not that they're
impressive.
expensive anyway. I think it's
Yeah.
only $3.99 or $4 per book.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's a little bit cheaper if you go to my website.
That's amazing. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Miriam Verbeek's books directly on Apple, on Barnes& and Nobles, on Amazon, on our website, and also on other platform. I also left a link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Miriam, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say it's actually very wholesome and even more than awesome having this lovely conversation with you around your books. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.